August 15, 1231, 5 a.m. From the walls of Kuju Fortress in Korea, the sentries see it first. Dust on the horizon. A dark line stretching as far as the eye can see. Then the ground starts shaking. A low rumble that becomes a roar. 20,000 Mongol horsemen. The deadliest cavalry force on earth. Heading straight for them. General Park Seo climbs the main tower and counts his defenders. 300 soldiers. Some terrified peasants with farming tools. Women and children huddled in the courtyard. That's it. That's all he has. The Mongols have conquered more territory in 25 years than Rome did in 400 years. They've never lost. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They just win. Park Seo does the math. 300 against 20,000. The odds aren't bad. They're non-existent. Any sane commander would surrender. Save lives. Live to fight another day. Park Seo gives a different order. Tell the Mongols to come and take what they can. We're not opening these gates. It's a death sentence. Military suicide. Absolute madness. But what happens in the next 33 days becomes the Mongol Empire's worst nightmare in Korea. A siege that should have ended in hours turns into a month-long bloodbath. A battle where 300 men humiliate an empire. This is the Siege of Kuju. The story of how innovation beat overwhelming force. How desperation created genius. And how the invincible Mongol war machine broke against a wall of pure will. Let's go. To understand what Park Seo was facing, you need to understand what the Mongol Empire actually was in 1231. This wasn't just another army. This was the most devastating military force Earth had ever seen. Genghis Khan had died 4 years earlier in 1227, but his legacy, more alive than ever, his son Gedi Khan, had taken the throne of the largest empire in history, and he had one mission: make it bigger. The numbers were terrifying. In just 25 years, the Mongols had conquered 24 million square kilometers. From the Black Sea to the Pacific Ocean, Rome, at its absolute peak, took 400 years to conquer 5 million square kilometers. The Mongols did 5 times that in a generation. How? Their military system was revolutionary. Every Mongol soldier trained from age 3. They could fire arrows with deadly accuracy while galloping at full speed. They could cover 150 kilometers in a day when other armies barely managed 30. They had relay communication systems that transmitted information across thousands of kilometers in days. But their deadliest weapon wasn't military. It was psychological terror. When Mongols approached a city, they sent a simple message: surrender now and live as subjects, or resist and be exterminated. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. They always delivered. Samarkand, one of Persia's most beautiful cities, resisted in 1220. Population 100,000 after the Mongols finished. Fewer than 50,000 remained. The city of Merv, 500,000 people, practically ceased to exist. The Mongols didn't just conquer. They erased entire civilizations from the map as warnings to others. By 1231, this destruction machine had set its sights on Korea. The kingdom of Goryeo had existed for 300 years. Now it was the next target. Goryeo sent one of his best generals, Sartaq. Sartaq was a veteran of the Chinese campaigns. He'd participated in sieges of impregnable fortresses. He had a reputation brutal but efficient. He didn't waste time on prolonged sieges. If a fortress didn't fall immediately, he surrounded it, cut supplies, and waited for hunger to do the job. Then he entered, and left no survivors. He arrived in Korea with 20,000 elite horsemen. In 3 months, Sartaq took 15 fortresses. Some surrendered without fighting. Others resisted 1 or 2 days before walls were breached. Average time per fortress 36 hours. The kingdom of Goryeo was collapsing. The king fled to Gangwon Island. Kuju Fortress wasn't particularly important. Small, located in southern Korea. Controlled some minor trade routes. Nothing that justified a prolonged siege. For Sartaq, it should have been fortress number 16. Another quick win. But Kuju had something other fortresses didn't. Park Seo. Park Seo was about 45 years old when the siege began. Middle-aged general. Didn't come from a powerful noble family. He'd risen through the ranks by merit. Fighting border skirmishes against bandits and pirates. He wasn't famous. Wasn't a legendary strategist. He was, in every sense, an ordinary soldier who'd become a general through competence. What made him different? His mind. Park Seo was obsessed with military innovation. While other generals relied on traditional tactics, he read ancient treatises, experimented with new formations, designed siege weapons. His superiors thought he was eccentric, too theoretical, impractical. When the Mongols invaded, Park Seo received orders to defend Kuju. Nobody expected victory. The hope was he'd delay the inevitable while other fortresses prepared. Park counted his resources: 300 trained soldiers, some veterans of minor skirmishes. None had faced a real siege. 2,000 civilians inside the walls. Peasants who'd fled surrounding villages seeking protection. Walls 8 meters high, solid but not exceptional. The Mongols had overcome much higher. Food for maybe 3 weeks if strictly rationed. Water from a well inside the fortress, an advantage but limited. In terms of weapons, bows, arrows, crossbows, swords, spears, nothing special. The Mongols had battering rams, catapults, siege towers. Equipment that had destroyed fortresses 10 times larger. Any rational commander would have surrendered to save lives. Park Seo reached a different conclusion. He gathered his officers the night before the Mongols arrived. Tomorrow we'll see if 20,000 men who believe they've already won can defeat 300 who know they have nothing to lose. It wasn't bravado. It was calculation. Park understood something fundamental about the Mongols. Their greatest strength was also their weakness. They were used to winning quickly. Their strategy depended on speed and terror. But what happened when terror didn't work? He was about to find out. When Sartaq arrived with 20,000 horsemen and saw Kuju's walls, he smiled. This would be easy. He sent his envoy with the standard offer, surrender or death. Park Seo's response was clear. There will be no surrender. There will be war. August 16, 1231, dawn, 20,000 Mongols surrounded the fortress, and Park Seo was ready to show them this fortress would be different from everything they'd conquered before. The first Mongol tactic wasn't military. It was psychological. Throughout the first day, horsemen simply circled the fortress. Galloping, shouting, banging swords on shields. The noise was deafening, constant. Dust raised by thousands of horses covered the sky. It was a display of power designed to break morale before the first attack. Inside the walls, panic was real. Civilians cried, begged Park Seo to surrender, to negotiate, to do something. Young soldiers trembled. They'd never seen anything like this. Park Seo ordered silence. He gathered everyone, soldiers, civilians, elders, children, in the central courtyard. The Mongols expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender. What they don't know is we've already made our decision. We're not leaving here alive if we fall. So we'll make every hour cost them blood. It wasn't inspiring. It was realistic, brutal, honest, and strangely, that calmed some. If they were going to die, at least it would be with dignity. On the second day, Sartaq sent another envoy. The offer had changed. Surrender and will only execute military leaders. Civilians will live. Generous by Mongol standards. Park Seo didn't even respond. Just sent the envoy back empty-handed. Sartaq understood. No negotiation. He ordered siege preparations. While Park watched from the tower, he saw them building battering rams, mobile siege towers, catapults. They had captured Chinese engineers who knew all siege warfare secrets. But Park had been preparing too. Before the Mongols arrived, he'd implemented modifications his officers thought strange. Now those modifications made sense. First, deep trenches dug just behind the main walls. If Mongols breached, they'd find another obstacle. Second, elevated wooden platforms behind walls where archers could reposition quickly. Third, he'd gathered all oil, tar, and flammable materials in the region. Park divided his 300 soldiers into specialized groups. 100 archers, 80 spearmen, the 60 men for special defenses he designed, 60 mobile reserve. But his most valuable resource wasn't soldiers, it was civilians. Park did something no commander had attempted. He armed the population. Not to fight, that would be suicide. To sustain the war effort, women organized into production teams. Manufacturing arrows constantly, turning any metal into tips. Elders handled rationing food and water. Children over 10 became messengers between wall sections. Everyone had a function. No one was idle. Park understood why. If everyone stayed busy, they'd have less time to panic. He also implemented rotating shifts. While other commanders kept all soldiers on walls during attacks, exhausted, without rest, Park established 1/3 on duty at any time, 2/3 rested, 8 recovered. His men would always be fresher than the enemy. On day 3, Sartaq completed preparations. 3 battering rams, 2 mobile siege towers, 6 catapults. More than enough. He sent one last message. Tomorrow at dawn, the attack begins. This is your last chance. Park gathered his commanders that night, showed them tactics no one had used before. Rivers of fire flowing down walls. Crossbows modified to fire multiple arrows. Secret tunnels to collapse wall sections if Mongols positioned there. One officer asked, "General, how are we going to survive against 20,000? Park answered with brutal honesty, "We're not going to survive, but we're going to make them regret coming here. Every meter will cost them 100 men." Day 4 dawned with thick fog. Through it, defenders heard the sound that had terrified empires, the Mongol war drum. Boom, boom, the catapults began firing. Rocks the size of men flew over walls, crashing into buildings. It was the prelude. The softening. Park ordered civilians into the most solid stone buildings. He lost 15 people that first day, crushed by rocks. But he didn't surrender. At day's end, when bombardment ceased, Park climbed the highest wall. He could see campfires of 20,000 men stretching to the horizon, a sight that would make any sane man flee. But Park wasn't sane. He was a man who decided if he died, he'd drag as many enemies with him as possible. At dawn on day 5, Mongols would launch their first real attack, and Park was ready to show them this fortress was different. Day 5. Dawn. Clear sky. At 6 a.m. Sartaq ordered the first total assault. 3,000 dismounted horsemen advanced in close formation, protected by shields. Behind them, battering rams pushed by 50 men each, siege towers with Mongol archers rolling toward walls. Park watched. Didn't give the fire order. Not yet. 100 meters. 80-60. Mongol archers began firing. Sky covered with arrows. Defenders crouched behind parapets. Some arrows found targets. 7 Korean soldiers wounded. 50 meters. 40. All archers positioned. 30 meters. Now. 100 bows fired simultaneously, not randomly. Park had trained archers to aim at specific zones. First 2 Mongol rows fell instantly, before they could react. Second arrow wave. Then third. Park had established rotating fire rhythm. While one group fired, another tensed bows. Constant flow of projectiles. Mongols kept advancing. Reached walls. Placed ladders. Battering rams struck main gates. Thunderous sound. Then Park activated his first surprise. He'd ordered channels built at wall tops, channels leading downward across stone. When Mongols began climbing, he ordered boiling oil poured into channels. Oil didn't just fall on climbers. It flowed across the entire wall like rivers of liquid fire. Screams of burned Mongols were deafening. Men fell from ladders, dragging others. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. But Mongols didn't retreat. They never retreated. They sent more men. For every climber who fell, 2 took his place. At the main gate, boom. Boom, boom. Wood began splintering. Park had anticipated this. Behind the main gate, a second gate reinforced with iron and stones. When the first gate finally gave way after 2 hours, Mongols found a solid wall. Sartaq's frustration was visible. He ordered the attack intensified. Siege towers finally reached walls. Mongol archers began firing directly at defenders, killed 12 Korean soldiers in minutes. First time Mongols achieved real foothold. Park moved his reserve. 60 fresh men climbed walls with specially designed long spears. They didn't try to destroy towers. Impossible. Instead, they pushed. Mongol towers were heavy but unstable. With coordinated effort, defenders toppled one. Mongol archers inside fell screaming, crushed by their own structure. First attack lasted 4 hours. When Sartaq finally ordered retreat, Mongols left 200 corpses around walls. Defenders lost 23 men. Small victory, but a victory. For the first time, Mongols hadn't taken a fortress in first assault, but Park knew this was just beginning. Day 6. Sartaq changed strategy. No more massive frontal attacks. Instead, constant rotating attacks. 500 men every 2 hours. Goal wasn't immediate conquest. It was exhaustion. No time to rest. It was devastating. Park soldiers couldn't sleep, couldn't lower guard. Every 2 hours another wave, for 3 consecutive days. This worked perfectly. Defenders exhausted, operating on 2 hours sleep per day. Casualties accumulated, not just from combat but exhaustion. Men falling asleep at posts, falling from walls. By day 8, Park had lost 71 men. 229 operational soldiers left. Mongols lost 800. But at 19th, 200 more. The math was brutal. That night, Park made a radical decision. We'll no longer defend the entire wall. We'll concentrate on 3 key points. The rest abandon. His officers protested. Abandoning wall sections meant allowing Mongol positions. But Park had calculated everything. By concentrating forces on 3 fortified points, he could implement real rotations. His men could sleep, recover. And when Mongols tried exploiting abandoned sections, they'd find traps. Day 9. Mongols noticed unprotected wall sections. Sartaq ordered concentrated attack. 500 Mongols climbed without resistance. They thought they'd achieved breakthrough. They entered a trap. Park had mined those sections. When enough Mongols were inside, he detonated rudimentary explosives, gunpowder from Chinese ceremonial rockets. Explosion wasn't massive, but it collapsed part of inner wall, trapped Mongols in rubble. Survivors found themselves enclosed, surrounded by Korean archers on elevated positions. Massacre. Of 500 who entered, only 50 retreated. This was the psychological turning point. Mongols began to doubt. For the first time in years, they faced an enemy that not only resisted but outmaneuvered them. Sartaq was furious. He'd lost 100 men in a week. Unacceptable. He ordered more siege equipment from base camp 50 km away. He'd razed Kuju completely. Days 10 weapons in relative pause. Mongols bombarded with catapults but no ground assaults. Regrouping. Preparing something bigger. Park used this wisely, repaired walls, reorganized defenses. Most important, spoke with his men, reminded them why they fought, not for glory, not for the king who abandoned them. They fought because every day they resisted was one more day Mongols weren't conquering another Korean city. Every Mongol who died here was one less killing families elsewhere. They weren't heroes. They were an obstacle, but an obstacle that was working. Day 120, new Mongol siege equipment arrived. Sartaq now had 10 catapults, 5 new battering rams, 2,000 fresh soldiers. That night Park climbed the highest tower. Observed enemy campfires like stars. So many. One captain approached. "General, how much longer?" Park didn't lie. "I don't know. But every day we resist is a victory. And tomorrow we give them the worst beating they've ever received." Because Park had a plan so bold, so risky. It would change everything, and he was about to implement it. Day 13. Thunder in the distance. Storm approaching. Sartaq decided end this. No more gradual tactics. Massive, definitive assault. He ordered 8,000 men to attack simultaneously from all flanks. Force so overwhelming no fortress Kuju's size could resist. 7 a.m. most intense catapult bombardment yet. 2 hours. Barrel-sized projectiles rained on fortress. Buildings collapsed. Dust and smoke made vision impossible. Then 8,000 Mongols attacked, advancing from all directions. Sound of their steps made earth tremble. Apocalyptic vision. Park had 221 operational soldiers against 8,000. Math was impossible. But he wasn't thinking about math. He was thinking survival. He implemented his most radical tactic. Instead of distributing men evenly, he concentrated 70% of forces on Owen Point, the main gate. Left rest of walls practically unprotected. Handful of archers. Officers thought he'd lost his mind. He was inviting Mongols to surround the fortress. But Park knew something they didn't. Mongols did exactly what he expected. Seeing unprotected sections, they concentrated there. Thousands scaled eastern and southern walls with barely resistance. In 30 minutes, control of a third of fortifications. Sartaq watched with satisfaction. Finally. Then Park activated his plan. The sections Mongols took didn't lead directly inside. Park had built secondary inner walls, creating a labyrinth of narrow corridors. Mongols found themselves channeled into hallways barely 3 meters wide. Superior numbers didn't matter. In those corridors, Park positioned armed civilians, not to fight hand-to-hand suicide, but on roofs of adjacent buildings. Instructions: drop stones, wooden beams, boiling oil. Anything heavy. On Mongols trapped below. Slaughter. Mongols couldn't maneuver. Couldn't use formations. Trapped in tight spaces. Bombarded from above. For every Korean who fell, 5 Mongols died. Confusion was total. Mongols began retreating. But those behind kept pushing without knowing what happened. They trampled each other. Fell from walls in chaos. At the main gate where Park concentrated best troops, 5 Mongol battering rams pounded simultaneously. Reinforced secondary gate began giving way. Cracks in wood and iron. Park waited. Let them keep pounding. When gate finally broke, Mongols burst in mass, shouting victory. They entered a corridor of death. Park had built funnel structure behind gate. Mongols entered hallway barely 5 meters wide. Korean archers on elevated platforms both sides, protected by wooden barriers. Arrows rained from impossible angles to counterattack. Mongols couldn't fire upward while advancing in close formation. Systematic slaughter. 3 hours. Mongols kept pushing, sending more men into deadly funnel, convinced mass would overwhelm defenses. But Park designed the system so bodies of fallen blocked advance. Mongols literally climbed mountains of their own dead. Mid-afternoon, Sartaq finally ordered retreat. Couldn't believe it. Sent 8,000 men. Lost 1,000. Fortress still stood. Defenders lost 47 soldiers, 89 civilians. Devastating for such small force. But they survived the impossible. That night, Park didn't sleep, walked the walls. Observed exhausted, wounded, traumatized men. Some cried. Others stared into void. They'd seen things no human should see. He had 174 soldiers left, 800 civilians alive, food supplies running out, water limited, arrows scarce, used almost all traps and explosives. Mongols still had 16 odd enough men. Days 1450 by relatively calm. Mongols didn't attack, reorganizing. Understanding what went wrong, Sartaq executed 3 commanders for incompetence. Needed scapegoats. Park used time to repair, reorganize, but knew he couldn't repeat same tactic. Mongols wouldn't fall twice. Day 16 Mongols built something different. Not siege towers or rams. Elevated platforms positioned out of arrow reach. Park watched with concern. What were they planning? Day 17 found out. Platforms were bases for elite Mongol archers. From elevated, protected position, constant arrow bombardment. not trying to take fortress, making it impossible for defenders to move. Any soldier who showed himself rain of arrows. Mongols learned if they couldn't enter, they'd make leaving impossible too. Beginning of true siege, day 1720. When this situation, Mongols didn't attack, just fired constantly. Park lost 15 men to Mongol snipers, won his second in command, Captain Lee. Arrow in neck, food running out. Rations reduced to one small meal per day. Children crying from hunger. Elders dying not from wounds but malnutrition and exhaustion. Day 220. Park gathered remaining officers. Only 4 left. Brutal truth, we have provisions for 3 days. After that, surrender or starve. One captain suggested desperate night attack. Break siege. Allow some civilians to escape. Park considered. Madness. But maybe only option. That night, while preparing desperate attack plans, something unexpected. Mongol soldier defected, reached walls under darkness. Shouting in Korean he wanted to speak with Park. Korean forced to join Mongol army years earlier. Told Park something crucial. Mongol camp was divided. Many officers questioned Sartaq. Lost 3,000 of men in 3 weeks. Mongol supplies running out, siege lasting much longer than planned. Rumasiu Gidikhan sending messages, asking why insignificant fortress taking so long. Sartaq was under pressure, needed quick victory or reputation ruined. Park understood immediately, Mongols were as desperate as he was. Perhaps more, he made boldest decision of entire siege. Instead of attack to escape, launch attack to inflict maximum damage. Day 23 before dawn, Park selected 50 best remaining warriors. Instructions: we're going out, attacking their camp. Not to win, to show we can still bite. Opened small side gate. Mongols didn't guard intensely. Confident defenders too weak to counterattack. 50 men against thousands. Absolute madness. But it worked. Mongols didn't expect attack. Caught off guard. 50 Koreans entered like knife. Set fire to tents. Destroyed supplies. Killed dozens of sleeping Mongols. Before they could react, retreated. Lost 12 men in raid. But psychological damage was immense. Mongols, conquerors of the world, attacked in their own camp by force supposed to be dying of hunger. Sartaq was humiliated, furious, desperate, and Park knew it. Knew desperate enemy makes mistakes. Just had to survive a little longer, just a little longer. The raid changed everything, not militarily, psychologically. Mongols no longer saw Kuju as simple fortress delaying inevitable. Now personal affront. Humiliation to erase with blood. Sartaq called war council that night. 2 options. Continue siege until hunger worked, could take weeks more, or launch final massive assault using all available resources. Sartaq chose second. His reputation couldn't withstand more delays. Ugidi Khan already sent 3 messengers asking for progress. He ordered all soldiers except minimal camp guard to participate, 15,000 men. Simultaneous assault from all flanks, no elaborate tactics. Pure brute. Day 24 preparations began. Defenders watched in horror as entire Mongol army mobilized. They knew what was coming. The final blow. Park had 162 operational soldiers, many wounded but could fight. Civilians reduced to low 600. Hunger killed almost 200 in last week. He gathered everyone. Not just soldiers, every person capable of holding weapon or throwing stone. Spoke without artifice. Tomorrow they all come. Nothing remains after this. If we win, we achieve the impossible. If we lose, we die knowing we made the most powerful army in the world bleed like never before. No battle cries. No victory promises. Just solemn silence. Everyone knew probably their last night alive. Park spent that night walking walls, memorizing every face, every name, wanted to remember if by miracle he survived. Day 25. Dawn, blood, red sky. Elders said it was omen. They were right. 8 a.m. 15,000 Mongols attacked simultaneously. No catapult bombardment. No intimidation, just human tsunami crashing against walls from all directions. Ladders multiplied like plague. For every one knocked down, 3 appeared. Boiling oil ran out first hour. Arrows second. Defenders fought with swords, spears, stones, anything. Mongols reached wall tops at multiple points. Hand-to-hand brutal. Park distributed best warriors in teams of 5, acting like firefighters, running from critical point to critical point. Repelling Mongols, establishing positions. By noon, Mongols took complete control of eastern wall. First time achieving sustainable foothold. Began lowering ladders into fortress interior. Park took final reserve, barely 30 men, personally led counterattack. At 45 years old, fought like possessed. Korean Chronicles record. He personally killed 7 Mongol warriors that day, recovered eastern wall, but lost 18 of 30 men. Attack continued without pause, 14 hours. When Mongols finally retreated at dusk, Kuju's walls looked like slaughterhouse, blood everywhere. Bodies piled both sides. Park lost 89 soldiers, had 73 left. Mongols lost out 100 men. worst single-day slaughter of entire siege. But fortress still stood against all logic. Against all odds, Kuju resisted. That night, strange calm. Survivors, soldiers and civilians didn't cry, didn't lament. They'd survived hell. If they resisted that, maybe they could resist anything. Days 26, 27, strange silence. Mongols didn't attack. Exhausted, demoralized, confused. Launched best blow. Failed. In Mongol camp, real division. Officers openly questioned Sartaq. Some suggested lifting siege. This fortress not worth more blood. But Sartaq refused. Pride didn't allow withdrawal. Day 2080. Mongol officers approached Sartaq with different proposal. Poison the water. If couldn't take by force, take by slowly killing defenders. Sartaq accepted. Mongols began throwing dead animal corpses into stream, feeding Kuju's well. Dirty, desperate. Effective. Day 29. Water inside fortress began smelling strange. Situation unsustainable. No food. No clean water. Only 73 soldiers. Park knew final hours. Day 30. Something unexpected happened. Envoy arrived at Mongol camp. Not from Kuju, from King of Goryeo. Still sheltered on Gangwa Island. Message clear. King agreed to pay annual tribute to Mongols. Recognized supremacy. If they withdrew forces, Gedi, tired of Korean campaign costing too many resources, accepted. War officially ended. But Sartaq refused to lift Kuju's siege. Personal honor at stake. Argued must finish before withdrawing. Days 31-32 tense negotiations. Royal envoy insisted siege lift immediately. Sartaq demanded 2 more days to take Kuju. Inside fortress, Park knew nothing of this. Only saw attacks ceased. Thought Mongols preparing even greater final assault. Gathered 73 remaining soldiers. If they attack tomorrow, it's the end. We have no resources, but we'll die fighting. On our feet. Day 33. Thick fog, Park and his men on walls. Waiting for attack they believed inevitable. But it didn't come. Instead, 10 a.m. as they saw something extraordinary. Mongol camp lifting tents. Withdrawing. Park couldn't believe it. Thought trap. But hour after hour watched Mongols dismantle camp. Load equipment, march north, no ceremonies. No formal defeat recognition. Mongols simply left. Sartaq forced by own officers to obey Gedi Khan's order. Humiliation of withdrawing without taking Kuju would haunt him rest of career, but no choice. By noon last Mongol disappeared on horizon. Park remained on walls for hours. Unable to process, his men surrounded him. Some crying, others in shock. General, did we win? Park looked at shattered walls, unburied bodies, emaciated civilians. Wounded soldiers, answered in hoarse voice, we survived. And sometimes that's the same as winning. 73 soldiers won 600 civilians. Resisted 33 days against 20,000 Mongols. Impossible, but it happened. The news reached Karakoram, Mongol capital. 6 weeks later, messenger carrying report to Ugede Khan knew, bringing news no great Khan wanted. Ugede reviewed maps when he received report, read in silence. Then again, finally asked in dangerously calm voice, how many defenders did this fortress have? Approximately 300 at start, less than 100 at end. And we lost how many? More than 3,000 dead. Almost 1,000 wounded. Silence was terrifying. Ugede had inherited largest empire from Genghis. Continued expansion with absolute success. Until now he didn't execute messenger. Instead, summoned experienced generals. Showed them report, asked simple question, how is this possible? Generals analyzed for days. Studied Park's tactics. Defensive innovations. Terrain use. What they found worried them. For first time, enemy systematically analyzed Mongol tactics and developed effective countermeasures. Psychological intimidation didn't work. Massive assaults channeled into kill zones. Traditional siege tactics neutralized. Kuju wasn't just military defeat, it was breach in Mongol myth of invincibility. And myths, once broken, are hard to repair. Ugede made surprising decision. Discreetly relieved Sartaq of command. Assigned him to less prominent campaigns. Wanted no additional publicity about failure. Less talked about Kuju. Better. But also ordered Kuju's defenses be studied. Tactics developed to overcome similar fortifications. Mongol siege engineers received instructions to design equipment neutralizing Park's innovations. In Korea, news of Kuju's resistance spread like wildfire. King of Goryeo, who'd negotiated peace from Ireland, was in awkward position. Park achieved what monarch couldn't, made Mongols bleed. Initially, King tried minimizing event, fearing celebration might anger Mongols, break newly signed peace. But population didn't allow it. Park became instant popular hero. 3 months after siege, summoned to royal court, traveled with 73 survivors, expected honors, recognition, elevated position. What he received was complex. King granted titles and lands, yes, but also ordered immediate retirement from active service. Official reason, rest after heroic defense. Real reason, political. Park was too popular, too independent. King didn't trust generals who overshadowed his authority. Park accepted without protest, signed enough war, retired to small property in south. Lived another 18 years. Died 49. Never wrote memoirs. Never sought more glory. Details we know come from surviving officers' records and Goryeo chronicles. For Mongols, Kuju became costly but valuable lesson. In later campaigns, Japan, southern China, they implemented new siege tactics based on what they learned. More patient strategies. Less dependent on massive assaults. More focused on cutting supplies. Ironically, Park's defenses made Mongols better at siege warfare. Innovation always generates counter-innovation. In terms of psychological impact, Kuju had lasting consequences. Following decades when Mongols returned with new demands found population less willing to submit immediately, resistance seemed possible. Not easy, not probable, but possible. Small fortresses in other regions began implementing Park's defensive tactics, not all successful. But Kuju's legacy endured. Sartaq never regained prestige. Died 1241 during minor campaign in Russian steppes, without glory. Without recognition, Mongol historians barely mention him, his legacy being general who failed where he shouldn't have. The siege cost the 200 Mongol casualties, 227 military defenders plus nearly 600 Korean civilians. In numerical terms, Mongols might have considered it acceptable, but in terms of time, resources, lost prestige, disaster. Because sometimes in war, it's not about who wins, it's about who can afford to lose. And Mongols, used to quick, cheap victories, discovered there was a price too high even for the most powerful empire in the world. So was Kuju the worst carnage Mongols experienced in Korea? Yes, not because absolute figures were highest, but because it represented what Mongols rarely experienced: complete tactical defeat against numerically inferior enemy. They'd lost battles before, lost soldiers in other campaigns, but Kuju was different. It challenged fundamental logic of their military system. They were machine designed for quick, crushing victories. Kuju gave them opposite: prolonged, bloody siege, and in end, withdrawal without conquest. Why did defenders win? 3 factors. First, exceptional leadership. Park wasn't legendary genius, but he was adaptable thinker, constantly innovated. Never allowed Mongols to settle into predictable pattern. Second, intelligent use of limited resources. Couldn't win with force. Won with efficiency, concentrated where it mattered. Abandoned what he couldn't hold. Made every meter unbearably costly. Third, Mongols counted on fear-breaking morale. Found defenders who decided dying resisting was preferable to living subjugated. That mindset is impossible to defeat with tactics alone. Park's legacy endured in Korean memory for centuries. Today, almost 800 years later, his name remains synonymous with impossible resistance. Kuju Fortress, though in ruins, is a protected historical site in South Korea. What does this tell us? That facing impossible odds doesn't mean surrendering before starting. That innovation can level unequal playing fields. That collective determination can achieve what individual resources cannot. 73 men against an empire. And the empire blinked first.